How many times have you watched an interview on a show and you could tell that something was a bit off with it? As in, you could tell that the person being interviewed wasn't really into it, or the interviewer wasn't treating the other person with a good level of respect. Have you ever seen that happen? You might not think that fights break out on news shows or in interview settings, but we all know that it's just a matter of time before something gets volatile. It's almost as if every interview can be a ticking time bomb, and when someone does explode, it can get very violent. Want to see some examples of that? We'll happily show you, but be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel first. 8. Shaker Al-Johari versus Sami Kreis. 16. Let's start out with a fight that happened back in 2014. It was a political debate, which, as we all know, can get pretty heated depending on who is debating, what the topics are, and how extreme either side is. Sure, when you think about how the United States handles debates, things may only seem like they're one moment away from a fight, but that never really happens. In this Jordanian debate, though, yeah, things got pretty heated. At first, it was your typical political back and forth. Then, as one of the men started to express his views, the other instantly had enough. They first threw a water bottle at the man, then they got up, went all the way around the set to try and get to the opposition, and once they got there, they threw a chair at them. What do you think this is, pro wrestling? What might have been the wildest part of all of this is that this was happening live, and even with the host trying to play the peacemaker and calm everything down, the guy wasn't having it. He was determined to go after his rival, even though his rival wasn't fighting back and was literally hiding behind the host so that they wouldn't get hit. If this happened in certain countries, there would be some serious penalties for this happening. So, the next time you think that a political debate almost got physical, think about how this one actually got physical, and then rethink your claim. Just saying. Siedmi Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, 112. We now go to the world of boxing. You know, back when boxing was good and was considered the greatest sport in the world? Oh, how times have changed, and not for the better. Anyway, back in the true golden age of the sport, Muhammad Ali was easily the best of the best. He had the skills, he had the charisma, and had the gift of gab to make any fight meaningful. Even if there wasn't bad blood between him and his foe, he would find a way to try and stir things up to ensure that the right intensity was there. Joe Frazier was a great boxer too, and when they first clashed, they went 15 rounds, and Frazier was declared the winner by a unanimous decision, which, as you might have guessed, Ali wasn't too fond of. However, the boxing world was in love, and they decided to do a Super Fight 2 rematch in 1974. Before that match went down, the two went on to a show to do an interview. And like you would guess, Ali was there cracking jokes at Joe's expense and trying to make it seem like Frazier didn't want a true rematch with him. At first, Frazier played along with Ali's games, but soon enough the two were going at it, and it took the entire staff of the show to break them apart. Those people should feel lucky that they didn't get hurt by the two boxers. The great irony here is that while this was a real moment, the victory went to Ali twice over. Because not only did he win their rematch, he would go on to win the Thrilla in Manila to end their trilogy. That's why Ali is the greatest. He's the champion of the world. 6. Andy Kaufman vs. Jerry the King Lawler, 157. We joked about wrestling earlier, but now we're going to show you just how real things could get in the olden days of the sport. And yes, wrestling is a sport, don't get us started. Anyway, back in the days of the territories, one of the most important things for wrestlers to do was known as keeping kayfabe, as in, if you were a heel or a bad guy, you acted that way in public. If you were feuding with someone, you were never seen in the same place together, because that's not what feuding people would do. The whole point was to make it feel real. And for one Jerry the King Lawler, one of the most famous wrestlers in history, especially in the territory he dominated in, he kept kayfabe to a fault. Enter comedian Andy Kaufman, who got into a beef with Lawler that would eventually result in a match at WrestleMania. To build up to that fight, the two went on to The Late Show with David Letterman. Kaufman started to badmouth the wrestling business as a whole, and Lawler didn't take that well. He straight up slapped Kaufman across the mouth, and Kaufman retaliated by spilling coffee on Lawler. Letterman was stunned into silence, as was the audience, because they thought they had just seen something very real. As it would be revealed later, the whole thing was staged, but no one filled in Letterman on what was going on until afterward. That's the power of kayfabe. 5. Alexander Lebedev versus Sergei Polonsky, 245. This next one wasn't staged, and you have to wonder if this is a symbol for how rich people feel they can get away with everything. On a Russian talk show, the billionaire Alexander Lebedev was debating Sergei Polonsky on various topics. It was rather typical stuff overall. But then, while Polonsky was making his feelings known, Lebedev came out of nowhere with a set of fists that straight up knocked Polonsky to the floor. The audience, the host, and the authorities couldn't believe what had just happened, and it makes you wonder, what was that guy thinking? As he would later attempt to explain, he apparently felt threatened by Polonsky and let loose those punches because he was trying to stop the situation before it grew even worse. The problem with that is that Polonsky, as shown by the camera footage, wasn't even looking at Lebedev when he was talking. He wasn't pointing menacingly at him or anything of the like. He was just talking, and then he got punched by Lebedev. Sure enough, the police felt that there was something more going on here with Lebedev and pressed charges against him. While Lebedev would apologize for what he did, that doesn't excuse that he did this in the first place. 4. Al Sharpton versus Roy Innis. Let's shift this back to the political field, but with a different lens. During the civil rights movement in America, there were many African American voices who were trying to guide things to one side or another. For Al Sharpton and Roy Innis, they were both trying to bring peace to the racial tension that was still exploding in the United States. The problem was that these two were on the literal opposite sides of the political spectrum, and thus had different views on how things should be done and who should be making reparations. Then, in 1988, the two were doing an interview when everything boiled over. Sharpton called out Innis and the people he was now supporting, basically calling him a traitor to his own people. When Innis attempted to defend himself, Sharpton wouldn't allow it. The two got right up in each other's faces, and then Innis shoved Sharpton to the ground. As you can imagine, things got pretty intense on the set, and the host had to do his best to calm down the situation. It was anything but easy, though. It just goes to show you that you can claim to be fighting on the same side, but if you don't back it up, someone will call you out on it, and there might be some fists flown. 3. Shaker al-Johari versus Mohammed al-Jayusi. Wait, didn't we talk about that first guy before? Oh yeah, that was the one who went after his rival during the first debate. Well, he's back. This time, though, he was squaring off against Mohammed al-Jayusi, who was a political analyst. Once again, the Jordanian men were debating about various things, including a conflict in Syria, but it was clear from the start the two men were more interested in making their own points known instead of talking to the other. Naturally, things escalated, but unlike last time, there was a lot of damage tone to the set. Just watch as they break the table apart and then attempt to use it on one another. Who does that? You can even see Shaker use it as a shield and then kick Mohammed at one point. To say that this whole thing was bonkers is an understatement. This was yet another case where two men escalated things way beyond what they should have. And yet, that makes for great television. We feel bad for the host, though. He was just trying to do his job. 2. Jim Rome versus Jim Everett. When it comes to sports talk shows, especially nowadays with fools like Pat McAfee being given a live mic, many hosts either try and go for full professionalism or try to do a lot of hot takes to make their show stand out from the rest. Jim Rome is a guy who has never been afraid to shoot his mouth off, and it's gotten him both fame and infamy as a result. One such incident was back in 1994, when on one of his early talk shows, he talked with former NFL quarterback Jim Everett. The problem here was that Jim Rome kept referring to him as a not tough, even saying that there were female tennis players tougher than him. Everett warned Rome to not make that kind of comment again, but Rome couldn't help himself and did so. Everett stood up, knocked the table over. What's up with all the table destruction? And then shoved Rome to the ground before leaving the show. Rome later attempted to apologize, but in Everett's mind, it was a case of too little, too late. While it didn't technically hurt Rome's career, it did highlight the kind of person he would be on many talk shows to come. 1. Jerry Springer. Come on. How could we not end this video by talking about all the various fights that have happened on the Jerry Springer Show over the years? In many ways, this was what the show was all about. Jerry and his team would find all sorts of messed up people and then put them in the same room together to talk it out. When we all knew that it wasn't going to be one that was about talking it out, all it would take was one wrong word or comment, and then people would start flying at one another without a care in the world. Was it over the top? Yes. Was it dumb? Yes. Did it help Jerry Springer stay on the air for an incredibly long time? You betcha. Now, while some of these clashes might seem outlandish or even staged, they reveal a deeper truth about the intensity of human emotions when ideas, identities, and egos collide. These aren't just random outbursts. They're moments where the facade of calm, scripted media breaks down and something raw and real pushes through. Often, these interview explosions are symbolic of something bigger: political unrest, cultural tensions, generational divides, or simply long-standing personal grudges that no amount of mediation can smooth over. Consider the dynamics that cause such situations. Sometimes producers intentionally pair combustible personalities for ratings, knowing well that sparks may fly. Other times, it's genuine misunderstanding or disdain, bubbling over after years of built-up friction. In a few extreme cases, violence becomes an unfortunate, but perhaps inevitable, byproduct of high-pressure public discourse. Either way, viewers are left stunned, glued to their screens, wondering what just happened and how it escalated so fast. There's also a growing audience fascination with watching people lose control. Entire YouTube channels and social media accounts are dedicated to TV meltdowns, worst interviews ever, or talk show brawls. It raises the question, are we just passive viewers, or are we complicit in pushing the culture toward more conflict-driven media? As more people chase virality, the line between genuine disagreement and performative outrage blurs. And yet these moments, chaotic as they may be, have often sparked real conversations. They've led to broader discussions about media ethics, interviewer conduct, how we treat controversial opinions, and whether we're truly listening to one another. After all, if a few angry words can flip a whole studio upside down, maybe we're not as good at civil discourse as we thought. Still, there's an undeniable entertainment factor. Whether it's a plastic chair flying across the set or a veteran athlete flipping a table after being taunted one too many times, it's the kind of TV moment you don't forget. It becomes part of pop culture history, replayed in retrospectives and highlight reels for years to come. So next time you see an interview turning tense, remember, behind every awkward silence or raised eyebrow might lie a storm waiting to break. And in a media world that thrives on moments going off script, sometimes the most memorable interviews are the ones that never finish. This phenomenon isn't just a product of modern sensationalism. The seeds were planted decades ago, even before the internet made everything shareable in seconds. Think back to the early days of television, when even a raised voice on live TV could send newspapers into a frenzy. As technology evolved, so did the tolerance for shock and spectacle. What was once rare became routine. Talk shows in the 80s and 90s embraced this chaos, not reluctantly, but enthusiastically, setting up confrontations as if they were headline-grabbing theater. Some argue it's devolved further today, where every live broadcast runs the risk of turning into a viral "did you see that" moment. As viewers, we like to believe we're just observers of these media blow-ups, but the truth is more complicated. Our clicks, shares, and reactions fuel the algorithms that determine what kinds of content get promoted. The more we engage with outrage, the more of it we see. And when interviews become battlegrounds, the aftermath often stretches far beyond the studio walls. Careers are made or broken. Public reputations are reshaped. In some cases, legal battles ensue. But in nearly every case, someone is transformed, for better or worse, in the public eye. Media outlets and showrunners may issue apologies after a televised altercation, but the clips live on forever. What's forgotten are the quieter interviews, the respectful debates, the thoughtful exchanges. Conflict captures our attention. Calmness rarely does. Maybe that's something we need to challenge as consumers of content. Maybe we need to ask ourselves why we crave the chaos and what it says about us. And yet, there is a paradox at play. For all the negative press these fights generate, they also remind us of a very human truth. Passion matters. People care, sometimes too much, about their beliefs, their reputations, their narratives. While physical fights are inexcusable, the emotional charge that fuels them is a reminder that the world isn't made up of passive participants. It's made of people with voices, convictions, and a breaking point. So while it's easy to mock these over-the-top brawls or shake our heads at grown adults flipping furniture, there's always more beneath the surface. These dramatic clashes don't just live in infamy, they evolve into cautionary tales, media studies, case files, and cultural markers of how fragile civility can be when pride and provocation mix on a live stage. The line between debate and personal attack has always existed, but it's become thinner in the modern media landscape, where once journalistic restraint and decorum defined televised conversation, now viral potential and raw confrontation too often take center stage. That shift isn't entirely accidental. It's fed by audience demand and algorithmic reinforcement. After all, respectful dialogue doesn't trend. One of the more fascinating aspects of these eruptions is what happens next. In some cases, reputations are enhanced. Yes, even by violence. Public figures who lose control might still be celebrated for keeping it real or standing their ground, depending on how their outburst fits into a particular narrative. For others, it marks a turning point they never recover from. One wild moment on camera, replayed endlessly online, can become the only thing someone is remembered for. What's even more troubling is how producers often anticipate or even encourage this kind of volatility. The more extreme the outcome, the better the ratings. And that gives rise to a kind of ethical gray zone in broadcasting. Do you stop a fight before it happens? Or do you let the tension boil just long enough to guarantee you'll make headlines? Audiences rarely see the strings being pulled behind the scenes, but make no mistake, some of these spontaneous breakdowns are only possible because someone backstage knew they might happen and said, "Let it roll," and viewers play a role too. The moment a segment goes off the rails, it's clipped, posted, reposted, and memed to oblivion. Engagement skyrockets. People don't just consume the content, they remix it, argue about it, and pick sides. These interviews become internet lore, complete with fandoms and feuds that carry on far beyond the original broadcast. What started as a verbal disagreement in a studio becomes fuel for months of online tribal warfare. Yet for all the dysfunction, there's something undeniably magnetic about these breakdowns. We're drawn to moments that feel unscripted, even if they cross the line into inappropriate or dangerous. There's a psychological charge that comes from watching social norms fall apart in real time. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's schadenfreude, or maybe it's the hope that truth will emerge from chaos. Whatever the reason, it works, and networks know it. And that's all from the multiple interviews that have happened where things went from angry to violent in seconds flat. Were you stunned that these particular fights happened at all? And which ones did you think was the most violent of the bunch? Do you know of another famous interview where the people involved went at each other? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.